Today's guest conversation is with one of the best and easily most recognizable coaches in all of baseball, Tony Vitello, head coach of the 2024 national champion Tennessee Volunteers. Here's episode 37 of the Baseball Forward podcast. Coach Vitello, good morning. Good, happy January 15th to you, sir. How are you doing?
Morning. Good. It's a little reset button was needed for all coaches across the country, but it's good to be back in a routine and getting back after it. And I appreciate the kind words. I think I'm at one of the best universities in the country and definitely arguably have the best support staff. So they make me look smart. And I don't know that most recognizable is a good thing because sometimes you do dumb stuff and you end up getting recognized for that or word spreads a little bit. But it's been an interesting journey with this program. And again, I think we got all the ingredients here of a lot of good people, arguably the best fan base. And of course, the facilities are on the rise right now. So it's exciting around here.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, talking with Coach Vitello here this morning, I'm a huge baseball fan just in general, and watching Tennessee baseball since you've been there, because I remember when you got hired, and I'm thinking, man, they're going to be good. That it's going to happen for them, and you guys started that ascent. And watching Tennessee baseball the last 5 years has been one of the most fun things in the spring. And I'll say this, I'll give you guys some credit. I have a 10-year-old and 11-year-old boys that watch baseball, and I think they're coming into their love and they're loving baseball. And some of that has to do with Tennessee baseball. How does that make you feel?
That's hard to comprehend. I mean, you're still, there's still surreal moments, and you're still kind of looking at the draft board in our weight room. We got a little list. It's like, man, I can't believe this guy turned into a third rounder or a first rounder. But that is a bigger or tougher task to grasp something like that, like literally affecting young kids out there. But if you look at the state of college baseball, it's not just our program, it's a lot. With the nature of the draft, you could call it the draft shrinking, less minor league, whatever it is, indoor training facilities. There's a lot of contributing factors to our game being as good as it's ever been. And there's more star power than there's ever been. The coverage is even better than it was the year prior. So there's a lot of reasons why young kids should watch and should gravitate towards our game. And no matter how we get there, whether it's Drew Gilbert being loved or hated or
Right.
Whatever set of circumstances, or, you like watching Skeens and you want to copy his delivery, it doesn't matter. If it grows the game, then it's got to be a good thing in the end.
Amen. Amen. Well said. You guys are coming off of the 2024 national championship, and I get it. I think you probably have already moved on, but how does that feel to hear national champion kind of in front of your name, behind your name?
Well, with the group of guys, it makes you proud that they learned some lessons along the way and made adjustments. Because, whether it's a hitter like me being frustrated in the cage consistently or constantly, you could use both words, trying to make adjustments. Those guys utilize the information they had from 23 and 22. And then even their COVID, it's time to put that word to rest, I realize, but even some lingering effects with that, with a guy like Kirby, those kids were bitter in our building for a long time that they lost out on maybe something special with that group, with a guy like Garrett Crochet being our Friday guy and several other draft picks and good talent. They wanted to make up for lost time. So there's our own unique story. And when Coastal Carolina won or Mississippi State won, there's your own story. But ours was this cool, you use the word ascending, but there was this cool building up effect. And in order to build up or make progress, you have to make adjustments along the way. You have to stay ambitious. And you've got to do some certain things to keep continually to climb that mountain, if you will. And then you may never get to what some people call the peak of the mountain. We very easily are one swing away or one call away or one slide away from not winning the national championship. And I think it's easier to realize that once you kind of go through it. Coach Schwanke can attest to that. And so our story is a fun one to look back on and appreciate, I guess, is the end result there of my rambling.
Oh, that's really good stuff. And what a what an elite club. And I know Coach Schwanke is in that club too, national champions. There's 3 guys on the screen, and one of us doesn't have a national championship. Uh, Man, this time of the year is awesome. Like, I remember this time of the year getting back on campus and the excitement, right? The energy, everybody's ready to roll. Are the guys back on campus? What's the feeling this time of year? I mean, we're a month out and you guys got Hofstra coming to town.
Yeah, it's my favorite time of year. And like any situation or setting, it's not perfect. It's a little wild to say today, the day we're doing this is January 15th. If it's okay for me to say that, today's the first day we're actually supposed to start or be allowed to practice. And we're a month away from our first game. That seems like a very small window, especially when you're talking about arms.
Yep.
Nowadays, you're talking about hamstrings or legs with explosive athletes. And heck, with a good hitter, you'd like some time to build up, those hands so you're not getting blisters. And then two, as a college coach, it's frustrating for the guys to be on their own and you literally can't visually see them. A couple weeks ago, you're wondering, what do they look like? Our season's 6 weeks away. So those are the negatives, but they are drowned out by all the positives. There's no better day in baseball than opening day because it's a fresh start. And we kind of have that on steroids, if you will, right now, a clean start to everything. The guys here haven't even started class. So their attention and their time is being spent almost exclusively up here in our facility. And yeah, it makes it a lot of fun. It's good vibes. Maybe you got to not read the top 25 too much and get distracted. Right now, it's just you got a blank canvas, and it's time to paint some art, not just for us, but for everybody.
Yeah, man. Oh, I love it. I love this time of year. Coach Schwanke, I want to get you involved in this conversation. I've heard so many good things about Coach Vitello just from former players, stuff like that. And obviously the things you read, you could tell he's a player's coach. So I'm curious, Coach Schwanke, from your perspective, how you speak so highly of him. Did you, when he was in Dallas, because Coach Vitello was at TCU, he was recruiting at TCU, he's at Arkansas. Did you recognize something special in him as a coach? Because, Coach Ward tells us that you're pretty good at identifying guys. What did you see in Coach Vitello as a young coach coming up?
Well, one of the things that's a constant with Tony is he's a relentless evaluator. You'll find him down the left field line away from the shenanigans behind home plate, watching players just like I do. And we would bump into each other a lot. The process is different. He's looking for guys that can help him win a national championship. We're looking for guys that we think have a chance to play at the highest level, but you're looking at the same players. And you got to find a way to get inside that kid's heart that you're recruiting. And it's one of the things that Coach Ward and Skip were really good at, and obviously Tony's become really good at, is you find guys that buy in and will pay the price to be great as they can possibly be. And you do that by going to the ballpark and watching them sometimes when they don't know you're there.
Yeah.
And Tony is always working on that. And I know his staff does too. He's got a great group of guys. They took care of a situation in Omaha for me, and I had a chance to meet his dad sitting in the lobby. And I know he's a huge influence on you, Tony, and he is a class act. And when you got a guy that's poured his heart into high school baseball and has developed a son that is ascending and continues to ascend and now has to defend, it's really fun to watch.
Man, I'll bring your dad up, Coach Vitello. Talking with Coach Vitello here on the Baseball Forward podcast today. I'll bring your dad up. Man, I think your dad was like a really big time stud. In DeSmit in St. Louis, he was a high school soccer coach and baseball coach. Many times over state champion as a soccer coach as well. So I want to talk about that dynamic. I'll leave it general to start, but talk about the influence your dad had on your career, kind of to where you're at this point.
Yeah, I mean, current day, it's kind of depressing because he's considered the real Coach Vitello, and I get teased by other former players, current players, friends, and that's probably the case. And he had the same influence on me he had on others. And I think it starts with, you brought his name up for whatever reason, my brain immediately went to the phrase old school. And especially with technology now these days, old school is a very vague term. It's overused. And maybe, again, it's maybe not very specific, obviously the opposite of vague. For him, old school to me was he was a man of principle and still is, and didn't budge on those. And I don't have the discipline and the character to be exactly like he was, but he did instill a little bit of that in me, and definitely a lot of it in so many people around St. Louis. You can't go around the city without bumping into somebody that played for him or competed against him. And again, kind of like a polarizing figure. You could bring up other coaches, various examples, or players too. I mentioned Drew. Everyone's got an opinion, and that means there was a big impact. But pulling back to my main point with him being old school, I think the one principle that has stayed with me is you got to work. And I guess you can't see it now, but I typically need a haircut, or maybe not the most professional dresser or anything like that. But I wasn't that good of a player. I don't consider myself on a coaching tree. I never really applied for any job. There was one instance where I did. I just tried to work. And I think I've been fortunate enough to surround myself with people like Coach Schwanke mentioned. Coach Elander works harder than I did at recruiting. And in this short-sighted day and age, and Spotify, if you want to listen to a song, you can click on it right away. Paying the price is a phrase you used earlier. Sacrifice is a good word. Eventually, if you want to do something, you got to work for it. And then when you get it, that probably means you got to work more in certain instances. So I'm grateful that he instilled that work ethic in me. It forced me to continue to work as a baseball player. And if I wouldn't have been able to walk on and make the team at Missouri, I wouldn't have a coaching job the way that I do today.
Wow. Were you intentional when you, as a player, because as a former player, I never thought about coaching maybe I was just an idiot, but were you intentional about your career choice? Did you think about coaching while you were playing?
I did. I think more of it was my household, because my dad also coached swimming. He helped with track and field. He helped with football. He settled into those two sports you mentioned. So and then he would work the football games, work the basketball games, the scores table. I'd literally sit under the scores table as a young kid. So I was just always around benches, coaches, and then competition on the field, court, whatever it might be, the fans, and kind of always was observing. So in the back of my mind, I thought I was going to own a business, which probably by now would have failed. But that's why I was getting my degree, and my MBA was focused towards that. But at the same time, I was watching on the bench Rob Childress, Dave Van Horn, Augie Garrido. And because my dad was studying Coach Schwanke's hitting philosophies and Gary Ward's as well, I've seen Gary Ward speak probably 5 times before I even became a coach. So while I was studying and taking management classes, and unfortunately accounting and financing, I was also kind of those topics: fan base, fan opinion, benches, how they operate, practices, and coaches. And so I think I unintentionally was being intentional, to answer your question.
I like that. Unintentional, intentional. I think a lot of guys, from my view, it looks like your job is a lot of fun. It looks like you have a lot of fun doing your job. So along those lines, does it feel like you're living a dream? Do you ever stop to kind of think like, whoa, what has happened? Because let's not kid ourselves, man. You're the most popular one of the most popular baseball coaches in all of baseball. Do you ever just stop to say, wow, what happened?
Yeah, it's weird to be blessed, because part of it is the fans here have propped me up or given me more credit than I deserve. So then it kind of feeds itself. And then for whatever reason, those MLB Network guys are so good to me. And not only do they invite me into being on TV, but they put it on a tee for me and make me look better than I should. So it kind of feeds itself a little bit. Okay. And it's like, you meet Desmond Howard, Dick Vitale, Lee Corso, these country music artists. A lot of stuff for me stems from Peyton being so good to me. It's kind of weird, and it's certainly not what you signed up for. Some things bad, most of it good, but it's kind of come with the territory, and I feel very blessed. But I do think because I struck out so many times, it helps me have perspective, and I think the real inner day workings are kind of what I dreamed of and what I wanted to work for. And the specifics maybe aren't necessarily what I envisioned, but I wanted to be a head coach a lot earlier, and I became one. And I didn't think it would necessarily be at Tennessee, but yeah, it's all pretty surreal, and feel very, very fortunate. And if anything, I'm appreciative of a lot of different things in my life. And yeah, it is kind of like a dream, and you might as well have fun on the field.
Yeah,
I mean, in the dugout too, because like Coach Schwanke's, I like recruiting. But staying in the hotel or driving to the field or not going to a wedding because you got to go to a big tournament at Lake Point, that's not fun. So when you got a moment to have fun, you might as well do it. And sometimes that's ended up with me jumping into the crowd or looking stupid or having too much fun at a football game. But, there's a lot of moments that aren't on Twitter that aren't fun. Again, that word you mentioned, sacrifice, or the phrase paying the price.
Oh man. I was Coach Schwanke and I were talking the other day about winning a national championship, the feeling, right? And it was so I was surprised to hear his response was, and Coach Ward said the same thing. It's a fleeting feeling. It's a fleeting feeling. So I'm from your perspective, the 2024 national champions. When did the 2025 season start for Coach Vitello in Tennessee?
Yeah, I think a little bit of it was in August. You try and set the tone of like it's a new narrative. And in college baseball, Division I baseball, it almost feels like you're a junior college coach now.
Wow.
Because of the draft date, there's a lot more kids that are sophomore eligible. The College World Series MVP was Dylan Dreiling. He was sophomore eligible. And then you have the portal. So you have some guys exiting, and turnover just seems to be much greater. I'll just put it out there. Mental health is an issue too. And some kids need to seek out more help, but some adults need to present more help as well. There needs to be a meeting in the middle. But there's a lot of reasons for heavy turnover these days. And it almost feels like, it's more 2-year instead of 4-year.
Wow.
And so that helps turn the page, if you will. So in August, it was easy to say, look at all the new faces. This is a new vibe. This is a new team. But again, our fan base is so great that there's always an event, we're going to honor the team this way, or we want to be able to take a picture with a trophy or something like that. So we kept coming up with fake deadlines, and yet something else would pop up, like we play Alabama in football and they honor the team. And so I think really when the guys reported back in January, I think all that is finally put to rest. And a guy like Hunter Ensley, who was a huge part of that championship team last year, kind of has a dividing line, and now he's a team leader for 2025. And 2024 will always be there on the shelf.
Sure. Talking with Coach Tony Vitello, the Tennessee Volunteers, today on the Baseball Forward podcast. Boy, you brought up a phrase, mental health, and that's something that is close to me. I think it's close to a lot of people, and I think it's worthy of having a conversation about, because I think about the portal, and I just think from an 18 to 22-year-old's perspective, it's almost like the culture of college baseball at times is so business that we lose track of the humans inside of the game. So when you talk about mental health, do you feel like that the transfer portal, the so transactional year to year, that's having kind of a negative impact on some of these players?
I think that's a part of it. And I think, again, short-sighted, it's what is instant gratification and what's the coolest thing to tweet out, and what's going to make me feel good right now. I got one buddy that always jokes about dopamine. even in small doses, sending a text to somebody that you're either angry with them or happy with them, or you get a text from somebody. These ups and downs consistently that we're all living in, but it's impacting young kids they're growing, they're developing, they're literally physically and mentally, they're developing. So it's double the impact to maybe an adult. And it's not just the portal and those ups and downs on Twitter or on your phone. It's the whole world we live in, and it's different. And I think, hey, when Coach Schwanke was coaching, I think he'd say sink slide was kind of more the deal. And then, last year, the last couple of years, it's been more, spin rate fastballs or working at the top of the zone has become. So as a hitter or an offense, you have to adjust to the environment. And I think our environment, we could say, what's old school, what's new school, this new generation's not as tough as mine. You could come up with all this different, but the bottom line is it is a different environment that the day and age we're in right now with the student athletes that they're operating in. And so what we present to them as coaches or administrations from the school probably needs to be different as well. And I don't know that a lot of stuff that we're doing, and hey, I can barely, you should see the stack of laundry I have in my room. So I can barely take care of myself. But I do think we need to look at what is maybe truly good for the student athlete. Because a lot of times that's said by a group or an entity, and that's not really what's going on.
Coach Schwanke, chime in there because I'm curious of your take on just the athletes today, the business side of baseball. Does that affect how you coach guys?
Well, we talked about this a little bit the other day about do I feel pressure when kids are struggling as clients in pro baseball? And I can tell you that that's a real concern when they're out on their own and they're out playing professional baseball and they struggle for an extended period of time for the first time in their life. And it sometimes results in, giving up the game. And most of the time it's because they run out of talent. Tony ran out of talent as a player. I ran out of talent as a player. And when you're a high profile amateur and then you go into pro baseball and face a world where everybody you're playing against is just about as good as you or better, it becomes a real struggle when adversity hits. And if you haven't been coached well and you haven't been taught how to overcome that, it becomes something that ends a lot of careers, I believe, prematurely. Of course, the commissioner, shortened the leagues and eliminated a lot of playing opportunities for people. So the cut comes a little sooner now than it used to in pro baseball. The draft has changed. Warren Morris hits the home run. I immediately I got to go talk to a shortstop because we lost one in the draft that happened 2 days earlier. It's a little different now because the draft is a little bit later. But those things all happen so fast for a coach. And sometimes we do overlook what's really going on with an individual athlete that needs our help. We had a young man at LSU that was affected by a suicide of his best friend, and we didn't know about it initially. And it reflected in classwork that he stopped. And because we did grade checks and we did class checks, Skip Burtman sitting in the quad with his cigar, watching guys walking out of a history class going, hey, where is so-and-so? And then we found out. And that needs to be done consistently better with players, I believe, at all levels.
Talking with Coach Tony Vitello here on the Baseball Forward podcast today. Coach Vitello, boy, I got so many questions, and I know we've got limited time. We got about 15, 20 minutes left. I'm just curious personally, because I know people are going to see this and they're going to be like, oh, Coach Vitello, what kind of music do you listen to, man?
Everything. I'll tell you what, it's quite a spectacle to end my run of free time down in Mexico. They had this thing that was called Afterlife, and it was basically like a EDM deal that, the show at the Sphere on New Year's Eve and over the last few times, it was that, but in the middle of the jungle. And it was quite a sight. but it was good vibes, and everybody is on the same page. My favorite part about my job is camaraderie, when everyone's truly on the same page, no matter what it is. It could just be, it could be in a classroom and everyone's into whatever the guest speaker or the teacher is talking about that day. You can feel it in the air. And so if it means I'm Italian, but also I got Irish blood, if it means, watching an Irish jig or an Irish band and everybody's into it, I've been over in Europe and enjoyed the heck out of that. So everybody says when you ask that question, or an easy starter, when maybe a guy and a girl are hanging out, is what's your favorite music? And everyone responds, I really listen to everything.
Sure.
And part of it is you don't want to put yourself out there too much and get embarrassed because you say, I got a Taylor Swift song on my Spotify list.
That's right.
Not that I do, but just using an example. But I truly do like everything if it sounds good to me. And then as a baseball person or player, you're at the stadium all day long. So to just do rap or just do country the whole day, it's nice to mix it up a little bit, and then maybe you throw in some Sinatra on the way home to decompress a little bit.
Ooh, that's good stuff. Because I picture you rolling through Knoxville with your windows up so nobody's barking at you, but with like some Tupac or some Biggie or something like that. Am I completely off base on that one?
No, and I was I was on the West Coast side with the rapping, but I certainly will do some Biggie as well. But it just kind of depends on the day and depends on the mood. There's sometimes I pull out of that parking lot after we don't play well, and it needs to be as aggressive as possible, or again, whatever matches the mood. But there's a lot of good artists out there, just like there's a lot of good players. So if you're willing to have an open mind and give something a listen, you might get into something that you weren't before. And that's part of being a good teammate. You can only have the aux cord.
That's right.
When Aaron Combs had the aux cord last year, it was way different than when Christian Moore had it, or Blake Burke. So, last year I knew our team was going to be good. We had like 80s hair band music going on in there. We could hear it through the coach's wall. And you had Poison and Motley Crue going, and I was like, this might end up being a good team here. But last year too, they were kind of like that. They had it sprinkled in a little bit of everything.
Coach Schwanke, are you West Coast or East Coast?
I'm classic rock, a little Eric
Clapton,
more country than ever. But you got to when you go to the ballpark, it's music central. Do you control the music, Tony, in the selection, or do you turn that over to someone? Do you delegate that?
Yeah, I was that guy. I mean, I can't tell you how many hours I spent at Missouri on playlists for BP or practice. And now I've relinquished that. Coach Elander handles the cage. The managers work with our players and they come up with stuff on the field. Sometimes Q, our strength coach, he'll obviously handle the weight room or give the players an option. So everybody kind of knows their space to operate in, and you end up, it's kind of fun. You end up driving down the road. Chad Dallas is one of my most favorite players I've ever been around. He's in the Blue Jays organization right now as a pitcher. And Chad's walkout song popped on I'm driving home from, maybe Atlanta, and it's midnight or whatever. And I kind of started to tear up because Chad Dallas's career had just ended for us. We went to Omaha for the first time. It was a magical season. And like you said, when the season ends, you got to get right into recruiting. You don't have a lot of time to let it sink in. And it was kind of a moment of, kind of reflecting on the season. And I was by myself. So maybe or maybe not, I got a little emotional for Chad there.
What was Chad Dallas's walkout song?
You're going to kill me. I can't think of it right now.
Dang it.
While I'm on the spot, but I'll think of it when I'm not thinking of it and throw it out here.
Let's go.
Something real quick. Because Coach Ward called me out of the clear blue sky one day and said, "Hey, I got the Oklahoma State job. I want you to come work with me." You recruited Josh to TCU, I believe. When did you know that he was going to become a guy that you would want to work with and trust the program to?
Here's two things, because I think I said this at the national convention, and hopefully I found myself not being myself up there because it's such a big crowd and it's a lot of people you look up to or in the crowd, and you don't want to say the wrong thing. So hopefully I didn't come off as arrogant or anything when I was like, don't look at my career as an example, because it was really freakish with how it started out. And a lot of guys don't get either the job or title they necessarily deserve or the finances that they deserve with their work. And it's been the opposite for me. And so anyway, here is two things that young coaches, I think I could give you. Coach Elander, when he was a player, it was before a lot of text messaging and group meets. He kept every single handout I ever gave the hitters. At the time at TCU, I was the hitting coach, and I also worked with some positional stuff. So, and then mental game stuff. If I had anything, I'd put it on a piece of paper and give it to the guys, put it in their locker. He kept everything, and he kept practice schedules too. That was just an indicator of looking into the future. This is going to be a guy that pays attention, works hard, is organized, values information. And then the second thing would be that loyalty he had as a player and also just as a person afterwards. And he worked at Arkansas with us for a year. On a staff, I don't think it's more important to have a group that's working together as opposed to a group that is an expert in their field. The best pitching coach and the best hitting coach together with the best head coach doesn't make the best staff in the country if all of a sudden they combine forces next year. It's a marriage. And, if you're not in a marriage it's not working, then you probably got to get divorced, or you're going to be unhappy. So I knew that loyalty and that factor of me having his back, him having mine, was going to be there. And there's a couple other things too, like work ethic. He was our best player, but our hardest worker, in my opinion, at TCU. So that's an attribute you want your players to have. If the players see it out of the coach, you're in business a little bit there.
When I was at Arizona, I kept Jerry Kindle's practice schedules. And I mean, in Tucson, you got the great weather, and you can work on your bunting game from 3:50 to 3:30. And it was down to the minute. I get to Oklahoma State, I walk in, hey, coach, I got this practice schedule laid out. That's beautiful, Jim. That's good. We'll use that. First day of practice, it's raining. He goes, you going to be able to coach now without I don't know. I'll rely on you right now. And he took us inside and we worked our rear end off. That's the beauty of being able to coach. It's great.
Yeah, we had to get pretty creative in that indoor at Missouri. And shout out to Barry Odom, who is now Purdue's coach and held his ground with some NIL shenanigans at UNLV this year, if you remember that quarterback. But he was very good to us. It's so important for athletic departments to work together now. And we use that indoor at Missouri. And Coach Jameson got so creative, and he turned what all good baseball players should do, or baseball people, he turned a negative into a positive. And I really think some of those days we were inside, we became a better team than maybe we would even if we were outside.
Wow. Sitting where you're at right now, you're still, man, you've got a lot of baseball life left in you, a lot. So I'm curious, from where you're at right now, do you have like regrets in your baseball life so far?
Yeah. Well, no, I hope I got some time, but don't forget Mexico. We mentioned that earlier. It's available at any time. But I wonder my senior year, here's what's crazy. When it was over, I was a role player. Towards the end, I was starting, and then I ended my career. This was before the hit by pitch rules. I got hit by pitch. It was a 3-2 count. So it was a ball. I should have just taken my best. Ended my career with a broken hand and fractured hand, and just kind of had to play with it. And I called my dad and told him, and I was teared up. And he said, well, you're either done or you can play with it. And in those, basically in those words. And so anyway, my career, bottom line, senior year, didn't play as much as any kid would want to. Should I have left? And I'll tell you this, and now I'm spinning this in my own head as maybe a little preachy to people out there, but I also would have never been a coach at Missouri if I would have left. So I just, maybe because of my own selfish circumstances, I'm a big believer. If you keep forging ahead and doing the right things, in the long run, it will work out for you, and you will reap the benefit of developing. Like Coach Schwanke was talking about, some of these guys, they hit adversity like for real the first time in their life, and they haven't been coached or developed to handle it. And a lot of kids these days, they all say in recruiting, well, I want to be developed, but their antennas say different. Yeah. They're looking at other things. But if you develop, then you're going to be armed at the teeth to be a businessman, to be a husband, to be a pro player, to handle the big league media, whatever it might be. And so for me, again, if I would have maybe did something else, I wouldn't have benefited as much in the long run, even though it wasn't as gratifying in the short run. And everybody's circumstances are different. Yep. There's coaching changes and things like that. But it really is frustrating. And I think the roster change is going to make it worse for a few years for guys. That story of the kid in 2022, our team was built around guys like this. That kid that redshirted and then only played a little, but really learned and progressed those 2 years. And then those 2 years, kind of like a lawyer that has to do all the work early, and then the salary kind of bumps up as you get older. That third year, man, let it rip. And for some guys, it was their fourth year on that team. But I fear we're losing that deal a little bit. And then, at a smaller school, they do a great job of recognizing talent. The kid develops, they do all the right things with them, and then they don't even get to see that third year where the kid blows up because he moves on to a different school. And hey, we're doing whatever we got to do here to win. I'm just kind of pointing some things out about the nature of young kids now is what is right in front of me, which is important. But I think Gary Ward said this, Coach Schwanke, I'll never forget it. He said, and this is how old it was because he said VCR, you should have a vision of where you want to go. Where's your destination, or where are you looking to get as a player, and then press rewind on the VCR, and here you are today. How are you going to get there? So I think, in the words of Coach Ward, long-term should be looked at first and should be made a priority. But then, of course, you need to look at the most important day of the day for a hitter or pitcher is right now, is today.
That's right. So with Baseball Forward, Coach Schwanke and I, our MO, our mission is to pass the game on to the next generation of ball players and coaches, and passionately do it, man. Baseball is the most beautiful game on the planet. So there's a lot of people out there that are going to want your advice, specific demographics. So I just want to start with this. So Baseball Forward, passing the game on. If you were sitting to a group of young players, what would your advice be to them just in general about baseball? And hey, you're talking to them, you want to motivate them. What advice would you give young players coming up in the game?
I think make sure you attach yourself to somebody that is a little bit older than you. So it's easy to use high school. And I know we're also talking about younger kids, but if you're at a high school and you're a freshman, at the very least, find a sophomore. Maybe it's more ideal a junior or senior. That is one thing I've seen players do is find someone that knows more than you and set your ego aside and have kind of that big brother system. But then using the word system too, create a support system. And a 10-year-old kid is not going to write down on a piece of, maybe he would, maybe he writes down on a piece of paper, here I am in the middle of this paper. Who are all the people that can help me achieve these goals? And how am I going to be appreciative to those people? I'm going to work my ass off or my butt off to make sure mom and dad are on that. They're paying good money for me to go to these lessons. And then when I have an hour with this guy in the cage because I'm doing a lesson, I'm going to make sure I eat right and I'm well rested going into that thing. And maybe I listen to my walk-up song or whatever song, classic rock Coach Schwanke's a fan of, to get you juiced up so you're locked in for that hour and you're showing appreciation that way rather than just saying thank you. But use the people around you. We want to be used as coaches. And most of the successful people I know, if not all, they didn't get to where they got by themselves. It's dang near impossible. Even like a comedian who's up on the stage all by himself, he studied other comedians and he got feedback from the guy who maybe went on before him. He asked him, what do you think about this joke, whatever, or gets advice. So, create a support system. I don't think there's an age that's too young to use that philosophy. And then the other thing is add some personality to the deal. I'm in our team meeting room here, and I'll just be honest. There's been some guys that are on teams that sit in these seats that it's kind of hard to remember exactly how they were or what they said or what, and then most of our other guys, they have a personality you remember. And I remember hearing a great catching talk at the ABCA. Add some personality to the position. Tony Pena was one of the first guys that would do that. And our guy, Cal Stark, was a genius at adding personality to the game last year, and it benefited us a lot. So have your flair. It's a day and age where it's okay. Everyone's got a different iPhone case. Everyone's got a different bit of flair they got on their elbow when they're hitting. Hey, if you're old school and you don't like it, too bad. That's what we got going on. And maybe it's not gear, it's just your person. Sorry, coach. but I think find your own personality, because that's going to make you happy. Like, hey, when I'm in the locker room, I'm all business. Maybe that's the way you like it. We had a kid last year, Cam Bates, real good player. He's all business. And then we had a kid, Luke Lipsius, who was one of our best players ever. He's like a little leaguer. He was an engineer student, very serious in the classroom. Wow. So probably when he got over here, this was like recess. Wow. And it's like, this kid kind of looks like he's 25, but he acts like he's 12. And it was so fun to be around, but it was personality. So those would kind of be a couple things off the rip.
I love hearing that, because I know this. You could just tell it. Your guys love you. So I want to know, in your estimation, why do the players love playing for you so much?
I think because I'm soft compared to my dad. And maybe, again, that doesn't make it on Twitter, but I think I am. But then also I think I'm, again, not a good example, because I'm jealous of those that have a family and can juggle this. I'm actually mystified by it a little bit too. So I have more time to go out recruiting, and I have more time at the field, and I think they appreciate that. I've tried to add a little more balance, but I'm always here. And if they want to talk or they want to hit, fortunately, my days are waning, but I can still throw to them or hit fungos to them anytime they want. So I think the availability is a big part of it as well.
I got you.
And I look up to these guys. I mean, I'm jealous. Coach Schwanke made me feel bad. He said I ran out of talent. Little does he know I ran out of talent in like 8th grade, but my dad was a good coach. So I played for him, and then he got me a walk-on shot at Missouri. But I've always looked up to good players, and I enjoy watching these guys. And that's what's really fun about doing the draft. Instead of saying the words Charlie Condon and wanting to have a panic attack on draft day, it's like, man, this is going to be fun to watch. And Colorado drafted him. He gets to hit in altitude. This will be really fun. So, you're not a good recruiter if you're not a fan of good players.
Boy, that's a good comment right there. I'm interested to hear. A lot of parents can probably listen to this. Okay. So advice that you have for parents of baseball players, just in general.
That's so dangerous, because I'm not a parent, and no one is more loved than your kid. And I think, and I would do this too, I think you're going to see things through, you're going to have some blinders on or rose-colored glasses, whatever you want to call it. You're always going to take your kid's side, and that's the way it should be. But I do think taking a step back and having some perspective on that, maybe think twice about questioning the coach at dinner, even if it's just you and your son, or questioning your other teammates, the guy that didn't field a ground ball behind your son who's a pitcher. Maybe you say it, but at least take a deep breath and make sure it's the right thing to say, because you're always going to have favoritism towards your kid. And again, anything I say in this category, I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I'm just giving you an honest answer. And one thing that I really do feel wholehearted about is it would be such a better kumbaya world we live in if everybody played their role with the kid. I am not the trainer. So someone badmouthed me for not standing next to one of our guys that was hurt on the field. But all I'm going to do is get in the way. And also, I don't want our trainer, Woody, to feel like I'm hovering over him. His job is to clear guys. And then I'll tell our players, just because you're medically cleared doesn't mean the coaches maybe want to give you an extra 4 days because of the way the schedule's lined up to rest your ankle or whatever it might be. Our nutritionist, it's not my job to say, this kid shouldn't, or let her do that. And a parent is a parent, and the agent needs to be the agent, and the financial advisor needs to be finances. It's not my job to say whether a kid should or should not buy a car. You know, scouts need to scout and need to dig up information. And, you know, gosh dang it, I got myself in trouble. But, you know, those guys, it's human nature to say, man, it'd be nice if you'd hit for some more power. Well, I've coached a kid that heard that. And then, you know, the next thing that junior year was a mess.
Oh.
So I'm friends with those guys. They work their butt off. I make plenty of mistakes. So again, I'm not throwing arrows at anybody. It's just that little circle or the support staff I talked about, or people that are involved in the players' lives. It just would be a better world, I feel, if everybody played their role instead of trying to, you know, take on everything that has to do with the player. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. And I'm gonna finish with I want a less than a 1 minute answer on this last question, Coach, if you can. Coach Vitello, why do you love baseball so much?
The competitiveness. There is a whole field of guys out there, and the catcher does have to catch the pitcher, but it is pitcher versus hitter, and it is one-on-one, mano a mano. It's like American Idol. You're on the stage. You cannot hide in that situation. You might be embarrassed. You might end up being a meme if you're a big leaguer or you play for a big enough school. But those are the facts of the case. And the one thing about baseball, too, is it's not once a week, and no disrespect to football, but it's not what can you do, but how many times can you do it? So if you had success, that's great, but you're going to have another at-bat against that guy. And if you struck the guy out, that's great. But if you're a big-time pitcher, you might be facing him 4 times total, so you better hook it up.
I love it. I love it. Coach Vitello, we're going to let you go today. Hey, it's been awesome talking to you. We really appreciate you coming on and taking some time with us. Know it's a busy time of the year. Just know what you're doing for the game. Man, I see it from my perspective as a dad. Man, you're impacting the game the right way. Thank you for that. Keep doing what you're doing. You got fans everywhere. And Coach Schwanke, take us out and give us something to Coach Vitello, and then Coach Vitello, give us your last comments, and we'll roll out of here.
Well, it's always fun to be around a guy that loves the game and wants to work the game and trusts the guys that are working with him to help him. I think that's a testament to your integrity and your character. And I look forward to watching you guys play again this year. It's a whole new year.
Thank you so much. Hopefully we don't screw them up. And I appreciate the answer to this question. You should have said that to every question. Answer in 1 minute or less, so I don't ramble. But Coach Schwanke has taught me a ton, as has my dad and others. Baseball is more than any other sport dipped and rich in tradition. And so it's great to have young people that are ambitious and want to make an impact and a new impact and add new flavor to the game. But I think you got to have a bridge to the people that have gone before you and appreciate the way they've done it and learn from them. I benefit so much from Frank Anderson being on our coaching staff. I think there's a lot to learn from the people that have gone before you, because it's a great game, and it is played a little differently now, but it's still the game that was being played, same rules, same distances, and things like that with Babe Ruth.
Coach Tony Vitello, the Tennessee Volunteers, good luck to the Vols this year. We'll be watching you. Good luck this spring, Coach. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.
See you, Tony.